This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA as we continue to keep things rolling along through the NBA playoffs. And, again, my man Sean, now we got to continue to kind of work that overtime magic on the autopsy reports. A few more teams now, dead and gone, as we say from the islands of the eye, right? But, let it not be said that, like, when these teams get exited, how these teams wind up losing, the fashion that they wind up losing, kind of brings it encapsulates everything that I think we all want to better understand about, what the future of some of these teams are moving forward. So this week we've got 3 teams that we're going to be putting on the slab, and they're all very interesting teams to discuss. You strip away all of the hoopling, the hollering, and you really get at the heart of the culture of the team and the dynamics of the team, not just what they've accomplished over the last couple of years, but how these teams basically had their seasons ended. I think also speaks a little bit more into what we're going to be diving into. So as always, man, love rolling out the red carpet to my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man, Mr. Warren Shaw. What's good, brother? Again and again, we're getting ready to lock down on some of these autopsy reports, but a couple of more award announcements being made, executive of the year, well-deserved, some really, really good basketball being played already, entering into the second round of the playoffs, the semis. So, man, basketball is good, man. You're living life wonderfully if you're a part of the basketball ethos.
As always, you know what it is, man. The NBA continues to give us amazing content. I think the first round, while not as extensive as some people would have liked, still brought its fair share of storylines that are worth discussing here. And as you alluded to, the NBA award season continues to push on. So I'm excited, as always, to get into this, brother. So many teams exited this first round. Now we're going to have to split this joint up. We can't bear everybody in one show. It's just too much. We have a limit. So... Yeah, We're going to get to 3 teams here this week, and then get to another couple teams here, and then the second round will begin for all of our NBA fans out there, man. It's going to be exciting the rest of these playoffs for sure.
Absolutely. As always, be sure to get at my man Shaw, at Shaw Sports NBA, or get at me at Game Face Lee. The show's Twitter handle at NBA Baseline, available on all the major platforms. Go to www.thebaselinenba.com to check out not just our this show that we're dropping, but also all of the other shows. And if you have a team that, we've covered via the autopsy report, I'm sure we have dropped it at some point in the last couple of weeks. So definitely check out, all the previous episodes that we've been doing our coveted autopsy reports. If you see the blue and white logo, or you're catching us here on the YouTube channel, that means we rocks with the 19 Media Group. 19 Media Group family be running these content streets. Go to www.19mediagroup.com to check us and also the family of great content creators that are covering the gamut, whether it's music, sports, entertainment, culture, you name it. 19 Media Group has got it. So go on to that site, check us out, give a like, give a comment, give a shout out, whatever you feel like, but just know that the content that's being given to you, man, it's a flavor for all ears. So we definitely encourage you checking out our peoples. All right, so let's get right into it, because we got 3 teams that we're going to be discussing in our coveted autopsy report. We're going to be covering the Miami Heat, Milwaukee Bucks, and the Philadelphia 76ers. It's kind of ironic because last week it was full of Western Conference teams that we had to attend to. So obviously we had to make sure that we equal everything out. It's equilibrium.
Yes,
right? If it's happening in the West, it's got to happen in the East. And so the first team that we're going to put on the slab is going to be the Miami Heat. And I don't know what you can make of it. I can say this. If anybody at this particular moment in time really doesn't understand that Miami and the Heat, it's a culture, it's a thing, then you really haven't been paying attention, to the way that the Miami Heat have time in and time again have made themselves a sustainably successful franchise. And listen, will we sit here and say, the Boston Celtics, wouldn't have been able to get past the Miami Heat if they didn't have Jimmy Butler? And I know, Jimmy Butler, was chirping. He's like, "Oh, if I was definitely there, the Celtics would be going home." Look, I'm not going to go out on a limb and say, the Boston Celtics would not have beaten the Miami Heat, right? I would say that they will be challenged. But I just think from a talent perspective, the Miami Heat was just flat out just outclassed. And I don't know if whether or not it's a combination of the Celtics just being pissed, them recognizing they shouldn't be messing around with this Heat. You saw how I felt when the Celtics dropped one to the Miami Heat that they really had no business dropping. But the Celtics made quick adjustments. And part of those adjustments is recognizing that when you're just a better team, like you're a more talented team, you should be imposing your will. And I just felt like I don't know how much will the Miami Heat truly had left once their players started dropping like flies. And it was very little time for recovery to be made for them.
Yeah, so I'm going to start my soliloquy of Miami here with a clip from Erik Spoelstra after their exit interview. So not even after the Game 5 loss, but after they've had some time to lick their wounds. And Heat and the NBA culture is always really interested, because Pat Riley is going to talk after we air our show here too. So he'll probably even have some more insight into this. But Ira Winderman asked Spo here in this clip about hey, well, should y'all be taking the regular season a little bit more seriously? The perception that you guys load manage, because you don't need to worry about where you'll seed it because the Heat culture is so strong you can beat anybody. But I'm going to tap in here after this clip here for Spo. Play this for about 30 seconds or so.
To say that we did not philosophically take the regular season seriously, that's totally off base. And I can see why people would point to that because of the missed games. We're not a load management team. There were things that happened, and sometimes you just can't control that. I think there were still opportunities to find ways to win. A handful more games, and I'm sure every team, is going to reflect and look back on that. That's the feeling that we'll be left with, all summer long. Our goal is.
So for me, Ira asked a great question because I said a little while ago off of, ironically, Josh Hart's thing. And I think that's what kind of sparked the Jimmy Butler angst, if you will, about Josh Hart, because Josh Hart and Jalen Brunson said Jimmy Butler be on side quests for the majority of the regular season. Mm-hmm. And, then he'll focus in here to get back on the main quest when it comes playoff time. Really interesting thing. So I think that's where Jimmy's rebut is. But the fact remains that the Heat do have a lot of injuries. They do rest guys or have to sit guys out. And I think they have felt, well, Spo's not going to introduce that or say that here in that clip. I do think they always feel like they have enough and they can get in and do whatever they want once they get in. But that clearly wasn't the case this year. And I don't mean that in a sense of arrogance from them. They just have a certain level of confidence about their championship, quote unquote, culture. But the injuries were too much this year, way too much for them to overcome, especially with Butler specifically out. What's going to be interesting here now, though, is that they have developed some guys. I think Jovic has turned out to be a guy. Jaime Jaquez obviously has turned out to be a guy. They got Terry Rozier into this. What are they doing in Tyler Hero? My biggest concern is if when everybody is healthy, then what is the true role delineation of that? And we've already heard, and we've talked about this in a previous autopsy as well, that the Heat intend to go big game hunting, big whale hunting, like everybody. And it's always kind of that mantra around this organization. And Riley will probably come out in a couple of days here and say much of the same. So in some ways, you feel like, well, Jovic, Jaquez, Hero, maybe to a lesser degree, maybe those are tradable pieces. Like, what do you do with Duncan Robinson? And that can that get you a third guy? But Jimmy Butler is also going to be 35 and has a history of injuries. Bam has not shown that he wants to be a lead guy in the 7 years or 6 years he's been in the league, I think, up to date. So to me, you have the best coach in the league, and I'm not even here to quibble with any of that. But at what point does the talent and the overall roster match to be able to get you to that next level? And again, they're a year removed, if you will, from being in the finals, right? So I don't want to get too crazy, but they have some big decisions here too, with the salary that's a little bit tight, and some players that I don't know all fit the scheme if everybody is to be healthy.
Let me ask you this question, Shaw. Do you think last year Tyler Hero's presence in the NBA Finals would have made an impact on the way that the Miami Heat would have competed against the Denver Nuggets?
Some people would disagree. I don't think it could have hurt, but clearly he wasn't right in essence to play. I think Denver was a superior team, and so in some ways there was just more talent, more overall continuity on that Nuggets roster that I don't think there was many teams out there that could have beat them last year. So Miami on a miraculous run, but injured along the way even themselves, and Butler clearly ran out of gas last year. Tyler Hero could have helped some, but they know, and I think you have to trust what their organization does when it comes to the maintenance of their players. Like, hey, he can't go out there right now and give us what we need. So I think that's why he sat out.
There's something that I've been noticing, and I'm not putting this on Tyler Hero, but I think you bring up an interesting point about what the Miami Heat, where they may be trending towards or what they might be looking at. I'm seeing that when you have a player like Jimmy Butler, a guy like Bam Adebayo, while he probably will never exhibit the type of talent that Jimmy Butler has shown, the versatility, he's a guy that Jimmy Butler rocks with. He's a guy that he vibes with. When I see Tyler Hero, I see Jimmy Butler's expression of this is what happens when you coddle the talent and you don't make the talent accountable, right? I think this series between the Celtics and the Heat really exposed a little bit of the immaturity that you still see in Tyler Hero. While I think Tyler Hero is a talented basketball player, Tyler Hero still to me looks like a guy that has no idea of where he is within the Heat culture. And maybe part of that has been maligned because of the circumstances that happened in the offseason. But I think at some point, if you are still trying to capture whatever window that's still left with Jimmy Butler, you need guys that are going to be fully in with Jimmy Butler's style of play, with Jimmy Butler's mentality, right? And this is the mentality that somehow both Spoelstra and Butler have implemented within the Heat culture that have allotted their ability to be successful, right? Like, look, they won 46 games, right? Even with all of this dancing around with the roster and the lineup, they still managed to win 46 games, right? And that may not mean much in when we make comparisons to the Western Conference, but in the Eastern Conference, anytime the Miami Heat have made themselves viable to be playoff worthy, they're a dangerous basketball team. The problem is that their most dangerous players were just not fully available. Now, you would have thought that would have been the case with Tyler Hero. You would have thought that would have been the case with maybe Terry Rozier. But again, those are two very, sketch pieces that if they're clicking, makes them Heat even more dangerous. When they're not clicking, they become more of a liability because you got nothing to supplement if Butler and Bam are not on that basketball court, right? You didn't even see Spoelstra really even use Kevin Love. You know what I'm saying? So to me, it really speaks more to what is the direction the Miami Heat really are going. I'm becoming more and more or increasingly concerned that the Heat are going to look to do something now with Tyler Hero because he did not lend himself.
Well, you said concerned, or do you mean concerned or like hope that they actually get something done? So concerned would indicate that they probably shouldn't do it. But do you think they should move Tyler Hero on at this stage?
I do. I think this series shows more so. If you're saying that this is about Butler's window, you're going to have to put something in place there that Butler can rock with, that Bam can rock with. I'm not saying that this is Tyler Hero's fault. What I'm saying is you're looking at the pieces that the Miami Heat, if they're going to go big game hunting, right? And you got to offload. If you're not offloading Butler and you're not offloading Bam, who are you offloading to get back somebody that's going to immediately put them back in the conversation for this upcoming season that they're going to be playoff ready?
Yeah, well, Hero's contract, because it is, somewhat hefty in that $30 million range. Sure, that makes a lot of sense. Rozier as well. So he's in the $26 to $28 million range. So, I don't know if you're moving both of those guys. Maybe you want to keep one of them, even if they are to become a high price, backup, energy guy off the bench. But I think the Tyler Hero train is one that a lot of people are tired of being on, including Tyler himself. I'll harken back to the beginning of the year, where they teed him up for the question, and he said he answered exactly how he was teed up. But when they asked him, like, do you feel not wanted? Or do you feel wanted or not? He's like, I don't feel not wanted. So it was an interesting way to kind of say, like, hey, I'm here. I'll play my contract out. He was playing well before yet another injury, derailed a good portion of the season. And then he had to become kind of the lead offensive guy, despite a really good game 2 where he ended up having 14 dimes, and 20 plus points. The rest of the series, he was able to be taken out of it. And I think in some ways, at the highest of stages, you recognize now that, sure, Tyler Hero, good enough player, but not a lead guy of an NBA playoff offense. And he's an auxiliary supplemental part, and there's not shame in that. But I think Miami understands that as well. Tyler may feel very, very differently about what we're saying here today, right. But I think Miami has to make some decisions there.
And there's nothing wrong with that. I just think that his style of play is not conducive, even with Butler on the basketball court when they're in playoff mode. There are 2 different Miami Heat teams. Let's not quabble with this. There's the Miami Heat team that they have their runs. They look like they can be strong, but they'll never leapfrog, the more talented teams. And it's until they get right with themselves, which tends to be around playoff times, and when they tend to be the most dangerous. But there's only a limited number of guys that I think Spoelstra leans in on that he's going to rely upon to help get them in that position where they're trying to make that legit run. And I just think that, if you're the Miami Heat, you have to think about that, and you have to think about how they're going to kind of exercise those demons, so to speak, because it is becoming a thing now, right? It's becoming a thing where is it becoming more work than necessary when you continue to shorten the roster, but you're not shortening the roster because you're not talented enough. You're shortening the roster because you don't trust the guys that are there unless your big guns are going to be healthy and ready to go.
Yeah. So they have a couple of guys, I think on the periphery that you're still not quite sure about. Caleb Martin has 1 year left on his deal. Kevin Love has a player option. So I think those guys, probably retained. Josh Richardson was injured most of the year. He has a player option as well. Probably returns. But I think you have to make room for Jovic and Hawkins Jr. to take next steps and play more significant roles on that team, whether they're playing 3 and small ball 4 or whatever the case may be. I think those guys are players that Spo wants to have in the rotation. But then that leaves a guy like Duncan Robinson potentially out of the rotation or as the emergency break glass type guy for when the injuries, I guess, inevitably happen. I'm really, really going to be paying close attention to what Riley and company do, what rumors are actually involved in. Do they try to go true big game hunting here, or can they make smaller moves? And I thought they felt like they did that, I think, with the Rozier situation. And I thought it was a solid trade, especially for what they gave up. But I don't think that's going to be good enough. And as Riley continues to, he's getting older, and I don't know how much longer he is for this process in general. That question remains to be seen. But we know Miami is going to be in the heart of every single rumor here as the NBA free agency and the draft comes around, because they know this is not indicative of Heat culture for them in any capacity.
Absolutely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we'll be talking about the Bucks and the Sixers. We got them on the slab. But first, are you ready to elevate your fantasy sports experience? With Prize Picks, you can win up to 100 times your money during the most thrilling time of the basketball season. Imagine turning a $10 entry into a whopping $1,000. And with the playoffs in full swing, there's no better time to get in on the action. But that's not all. Prize Picks is all about variety and excitement. Whether you're a fan of basketball, hockey, or even League of Legends, Prize Picks has you covered. You can mix and match your picks across sports, choosing stars like LeBron, Caitlin Clark, Connor McDavid, and Jude Bellingham, all in one entry. It's the ultimate fantasy sports playground. Sean and I grew up playing baseball, so we'd love to mix in a little variety with our picks from the America's pastime. And for those who love a quick win, Prize Picks is the way to go. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. Plus, with quick withdrawals and an enormous selection of players and stat types, it's no wonder Prize Picks is the go-to app for fantasy sports. So what are you waiting for? Download the Prize Picks app today and use promo code CLNS for a first deposit match up to $100. That's right. Prize Picks will match your deposit, giving you more to play with. Remember, with Prize Picks, it's as simple as picking more or picking less. So let's get those entries in and watch the winnings roll. It's that easy. Don't forget to use the promo code CLNS to get your deposit match, and stay tuned for more basketball insights right here on the Baseline NBA podcast. Let's play and win together with Prize Picks. More Baseline, Callie Warren Shaw. Don't go away. We're back. Callie Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast. Next on the slab, we're putting on the Milwaukee Bucks, or we're putting the Milwaukee Bucks on the slab. What more can be said about the Milwaukee Bucks? This has been a tumultuous season for a team that successfully won, the upper 40s, upper 40 wins this season. What more can be said about this team, Shaw? Like, I don't know if whether or not this is all, an itchy trigger finger. I don't know if whether or not it just became a question of, we don't want egg on our face with some of the decisions that are being made. We can go all the way back to the Damian Lillard trade. And just from everything that moment forward, it just did not feel right. And in my head, I said to myself, the only way that this kind of alleviates itself is if Giannis Antetokounmpo just, goes in ludicrous mode, beast mode, and just goes out and just dominates. And I've noticed that is just far from what occurred. Even though people want to give him his props of being a, MVP candidate and things of that nature, nothing about this season and the way that Giannis played and the way that the team played around Giannis gave the impression that this was going to be a championship caliber team. They never found their groove. And it just, to me, I felt bad because I wanted to believe so much that this was a redemption year, so to speak, for Giannis. But I think it speaks more to the problems that I think now that are going to kind of be surfacing when we talk about the Milwaukee Bucks in this offseason.
Giannis had an amazing year, 30 points per game, shot over 60% from the floor, 11 boards, almost 7 dimes in that. Dame had 7 dimes, 24. I mean, there's a lot of offensively statistical numbers that give you reason for excitement about this. But Milwaukee, at the end of the day, there was just a vibe, an aura about them that just never really seemed to click in the way that you would have hoped. Back to the Adrian Griffin situation, and Doc comes in, and I'll play a clip from Doc here in a little bit in terms of like what he thinks some of the issues were. But to me, it's not as much about the injuries as much as it was about the team overall. I think just kind of like vibe, and I just don't think they got over the whole Griffin situation, as Giannis, he was even tinkering with remember in the summer, we're not that far removed, where he was like, oh, well, I might not be here. I might not sign another extension and all of these other things. And, talking about he needed another running mate, and things broke just in such a very, very unique way. But I, like many, thought they still had enough talent to kind of get over the proverbial hump here. But to lose in the first round, yes, injuries played a part in that. But that Indiana team is young. While Carlisle is obviously a very experienced coach, I still would have hoped they would have had enough. And while they showed some moxie, I think in Game 5, specifically, that was great for them to be able to extend the series, at least even give Dame a chance to kind of come back into it. But this Milwaukee team just was kind of playing from behind all season long, especially never really locking in defensively in the way that we're used to many of these Bucks teams being.
Yeah, it's interesting how what we're saying is that it's not statistically that this Milwaukee Bucks team didn't exhibit being competitive and challenging, but you clearly could tell that this team just did not function well together. There was way too much inconsistencies. I know a lot of people pointed to their defense. Yeah, their defense was not, up to snuff, but I think we all recognized that the moment that they decided to go after Damian Lillard. This was never about the fact that this team was going to be defensively competitive like their championship run in 2019, right? No, this was about the fact that they felt like they needed to score the basketball, and they thought that the combination of Giannis and Lillard was certainly a level up over what they had with Holiday, Giannis, and Middleton. But again, man, part of this whole thing is it's not just about putting the ball in the basket, especially when it comes to the playoffs. Sometimes they're just teams that just know how to score the basketball better than you. And the Indiana Pacers showed you that they can do that. That was why the defense was so important. That was why it was important that the Milwaukee Bucks impose their will and get stops, because there's just going to be a team that's going to shoot the ball better than you. They're just going to have players. They're going to get their spots, and they're going to probably find a group. Look at what happened in the Celtics and the Heat, right? In Game 2, the Miami Heat dropped 23 3-pointers, right? And everybody is all on about this. And I'm sitting there saying, it's not about the 23 3-pointers. It's about the lack of attention to detail by a team who had the second best defense in the NBA, letting them do it. It's not a question. And I'm like, if you're the Milwaukee Bucks, it's not a question of, will you be able to just stop the Indiana Pacers? It's not like the Indiana Pacers are just going to go cold in a 7-game series, but it's your lack of attention to detail. And a part of that is you just not being cohesive together, being together on the floor, putting Brook Lopez in bad spots where his defensive prowess that is elevated the last couple of years becomes marginalized because he doesn't have the same guys around him with the same discipline about going out there playing defense. And the moment that Giannis just wasn't in this series already told you that this team was in trouble. They were in trouble because now you could really see this team does not score the basketball the same kind of way when they have Budenholzer. And now that you've got Griffin and you've got Rivers, the ball does not flow and move the same kind of way when that kind of head coach isn't instilling those same principles in them. And it all reared its ugly head. And again, it just speaks to, well, what's the direction that this team is going to go now from a personnel perspective moving forward?
Well, I'm going to play a clip here from Doc because I think you teed it up so lovely. But I put out a poll on Twitter and I said, all right, well, which team would you rather be moving forward, Milwaukee or Phoenix? Because in terms of draft equity, they're both pretty barren, I think, right now. But Milwaukee's roster, top to bottom, seems to pan out better than a lot for Phoenix. At the same time, I was like, I thought it was an interesting question, but a lot of people saying, no, I still would rather be Milwaukee. But we talked about the Heat on the first segment. And you listen to a coach in Spo who was just like, hey, we got to be better. Yeah, sure, we had injuries, but that's not an excuse. Listen to Doc Rivers here. And while I like Doc, he likes his excuses.
Yeah, listen, I would have loved to have the opportunity. You know, I took a job when we were going in the hardest part of the season, and then we just wasn't healthy. There's nothing you can do about it. Like, I think we had 5 games with those guys. Huh? 6 full games, right? So, I mean, that is what it is. There's not a lot you can do there. You know, that's what we talked about upstairs. You know, I've had my exit meetings with Giannis and Dame already. And that's the first thing they even brought up. He said, Coach, we would have loved to have been able to work together. We like what you were trying to do. We just never had a chance to do it. You know, we talked about how to navigate through those situations if they arise again. You know, I asked them more practice time, even though it's in the middle of the season. Yeah, so that part, the continuity part, was very difficult this year to get any continuity for them, and they all understand that.
Oh, bless his heart.
Doc later goes on. He later is asked about the roster. And he's like, listen, the main guys we want to keep them, but there'll always be changes, around those guys. So he doesn't name out the main guys. So you assume obviously Dame and Giannis are those two, but I don't know if Chris is a main guy. Is Brook a main guy? I would imagine so. But is Bobby Portis a main guy? Somebody who, could have won 6th Man of the Year. So it was really interesting. He didn't get into a full account of exactly what that delineation is, but the Pat Connaughtons, the Pat Beverly, who basically just melted down, in that final game. Malik Beasley, do those guys find another way to be on this roster next year? And I don't know that because there's not a lot of great pathways to improve the roster because of all the stuff they've done to get Dame, to get Drew Holiday initially, and then to make all these machinations around Giannis ultimately. This is an interesting situation, an aging team as well too. They're definitely one of the older teams out there, an experienced team. But I'm concerned. And while I think Dame and Giannis both can get better with another year of continuity, for sure, there's reason for a legitimate concern about the Milwaukee's championship prowess. Can they be a good team, a playoff team? Absolutely. Win 50 games? Sure. But can they be a championship team? That question I'm not as convinced about.
Friend or foe, state your biz, right? You can lean in on how offensively friendly your team now has gotten and come to the realization that your defense is your foe. Or you can lean in on your foe and improve on your defense, but recognize that your offense will not execute as crisply as you would like it to believe. And this is the peril and this is the dangers. I'm gonna lean on something, Shaw, that that, you know, my apologies because I don't have the numbers here, but I can clearly tell you the moment that Giannis was not available for game 1 of this series against the Indiana Pacers was the awakening of Chris Middleton, right? For the last 2 years, we have been searching for Chris Middleton. And while we were giving it to the fact that he suffered a, you know, serious injury, right? ACL and knee injury, I believe, right? That essentially sidelined him and his ability to help this team run back that championship. And we've been talking about it the last couple of years, Shaw, haven't we not been saying? The key to this is what version of Chris Middleton is going to be participating in the playoffs. And he didn't even have a chance to show you that because he'd been injured, right? But it's very clear and evident to me that with Giannis and Damian Lillard on that court, Chris Middleton is not comfortable being the third leg. When he was being depended upon, right, during their championship run, Drew Holiday was one of the few players on that basketball court that said, hey, I can be your third guy because I'm going to focus on that defensive side of the basketball. And when the Bucks needed key buckets, when they needed an aggressive shot maker, when they were locking down Giannis, who was stepping up and hitting those shots? Chris Middleton. That person is gone. That person, I don't know if it's ever going to return back for the Milwaukee Bucks. And if you're now putting that on the shoulders of Damian Lillard, then that means that you have to hedge your bets about what version of Chris Middleton is going to be on that court, because he's certainly not the defensive player that he's been the last few seasons, right? So this is a big, like, if you're the Milwaukee Bucks, you really, like, maybe you thought that you swung for the fences when you moved Drew Holiday the way that you did to bring in Damian Lillard, but you did not complete the cycle in addressing what was needed for the team. And the role players that you now have all have shifted in what they were giving you last year. They're no longer able to give you this year. And you weren't going to cover it up by putting Pat Beverly on that basketball court. You know what I'm saying? So it's just interesting to me the way that this roster is constructed, and the way that Doc Rivers has responded is exactly the reason why Doc Rivers needs a talented basketball team that covers all the bases, right, for them to be successful. Because he should have called out all of the things that weren't apparent that he was brought in there to do halfway into the season, that you clearly see those guys are completely lost in executing on their own.
Well, Doc was consulting, you know, so he knew he had intimate knowledge of the roster even before accepting the job. I mean, let's not forget that little tidbit. Yeah. I'm really interested to see, again, who they determine to be the core pieces and what are the areas of focus for them as they push this thing forward. And while they got Malik Beasley, basically, I think on a veteran minimum deal, and I think that's great value for what he can potentially ultimately provide, you know, can you bring him back? You know, and is that who you need to bring back? Or do you need to, as you alluded to, focus more on the defensive side of the basketball court? Are you willing to give up some other pieces? Do you sacrifice more defense? Do you sacrifice a guy like Bobby Portis, you know, who's been very loyal? He stayed there at basically a steep discount where he probably could have got more money, and even for a larger, more expansive role. So even his salary is only like, I think, the $12-13 million range. So even in a trade, there's not a whole lot in terms of talent, at least perceived talent, that you can get back for that, because the salary doesn't make that much money unless you're comparing him with other guys. Then are you gutting the rest of the roster? This is tough, you know, and while I don't think the Bucks are destitute in any way, they have like $180 million like tied up in like 7 guys, you know, like that's crazy.
And where your top 3-4 guys sit, you know what I'm saying, where that money is it relative to what you see currently trending as, you know, are they of the top ilk? You can mask it up when you get an MVP like season from Giannis Antetokounmpo. Yeah. But the reason why you brought Damian Lillard in is because you want a closer. You want someone who's coming in on the fourth quarter. Well, how can you do that when the Bucks as a team defensively have to claw back into games because they start off so slow, or they're so inconsistent, or they're just no-shows defensively? Means nothing when you have to work so hard to get yourself back into games that you really shouldn't be out of to begin with. But because you have abandoned what got you there, this is where you are. This is what puts you into that space.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think you had sent me something with Giannis and Thanasis. And Thanasis's deal is up as well. So do they just bring him back? So Giannis has a buddy, has his brother on the team. I would assume at the veteran minimum. But they like, listen, this is not a viable roster spot, Giannis. Like we need more bodies on here who can actually contribute and help us on the basketball court. Like again, Thanasis seems like an amazing individual, but he's not bringing anything other than Giannis support, and that's still valuable.
But I think part of that as well too is because they're not spending any time to do that. Like I'm not saying that Thanasis, some people say, Thanasis is garbage or whatever. I don't think he was garbage when he did help the few opportunities when he got drafted by the Knicks, and then they just couldn't figure out a way to use him and they moved him, right? So now all he does is sit on the bench. He comes in 2-3 minutes per game. What do you think is going to happen to somebody? Maybe, send him down to the G League, get him his reps and make something. I bet you if he was getting double doubles, you bring his ass right back and put him out on that basketball court if it means something. But you already have that in Giannis Antetokounmpo at a very, very high level. So unless you're planning to use him, to your point, the way he needs to be used, yes, all he is a rah-rah guy or a guy that sits there and cheerleads for the rest of his team, as would there's 3 or 4 other guys that are on that bench right now that probably would be doing the same exact thing as well too. You can clearly tell Doc doesn't rely on a deep bench. He relies on the guys that he relies on to pull through. And this is going to be at the detriment, right? Because now
they have to have a certain level of depth, and I think that's that's the point I'm driving at too. So, like if Thanasis isn't one of your guys who, hey, in a bind you can actually play him, then there's no reason to re-sign him. But again, I don't know how much of him being Giannis's brother is like, okay, well, we need that to make sure Giannis is tethered in some way to the organization. I don't know. I think, and there's going to be various responses on that specific aspect of their relationship and how important it is. Jay Crowder's comes off the books as well. Obviously not the same guy that he once was. So vet minimum or whatever. Do you bring him back? Who knows?
I said that. I said that from Jump Street Show. I did not like that move at all. Listen, no disrespect, because I love Jay Crowder.
Played himself out of the league, to be honest.
He played himself, exactly. And listen, that's the decision. That's the circumstances. Or the consequences, of the decisions that you make, right? Like it's good business, maybe, because you're standing on principle for you to be compensated, or you don't want to play for someone to move me, this, that, and the third, but you literally played yourself out of playing, right? And so I don't know how many other teams would probably want to use you or could use you, except for the circumstances like there's not enough bodies on the floor, which it kind of says something, what I mean? It says something. So,
well, I'll close it up here by saying, listen, if you think Doc can get this team to play defense at the level that even the Mavericks are here now, so personnel is vastly different, right? But you see Kyrie, you see even Luka right now as we're recording in the middle of the playoffs, they're trying immensely defensively. So if you can get that level of effort from Dame, because you can't just try to filter everything to Brook. Especially with Brook being in his 30s, right? It's just like, well, everything is going to go his way, and we're going to try to have him be this great, defensive stopper. Giannis obviously is an amazing deterrent, but Dame is a guy who has to truly lock in and buy in on that side. And that's what I want to see if Doc Rivers is going to be able to do when he has the full summer and the full training camp, and there's no more excuses. I came in during the hardest part of the year and all the things that Doc likes to acquit himself for.
30-13, so hard. so tough. 30-13.
just settle down. You have all the things, and now let's see what ends up happening. But there is some significant roster construction around, I think, the big 3, 4, 5, because we're still not sure who it is, but we'll see what Milwaukee ultimately ends up doing. And I still think they'll be a very successful basketball team, but the playoffs is all that they're being measured on here at this point of their careers.
Absolutely. You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Coming up, we're going to be putting the Philadelphia 76ers on the slab. We got to probably, extend the table out. Joel Embiid's a pretty big dude, but we'll make it work. Yeah, more Baseline. Callie Warren Shaw. Don't go away. We're back, Callie Warren Shaw, based on NBA podcast. And next on the slab, we're going to put on the Philadelphia 76ers. Listen, the Philadelphia 76ers, Shaw, they are a team who you want to give excuses. They have them, right? They lost Joel Embiid for damn near 3/4 of of a season in which they were the second best team in the Eastern Conference. Okay. They were seemed essentially, could they win maybe 5 or 6 more games, would not have had to play themselves in, which meant extra playoff games for Joel Embiid before him actually trying to etch himself, into a level of greatness that he can help catapult this team over. Then obviously it does not help. Tyrese Maxey was in and out of the lineup a couple of times. I mean, my God, they had to lean on, Nicholas Batum to pull him out of the fire. Now, I'm not going to get into anything yet about our boy Toby. Well, I'm saving myself for this one, man. But I'm going to tell you this right now, Shaw. When I think about the Philadelphia 76ers, and I know a lot of people are harping on, Joel Embiid, he flames out at the fourth quarter. He's not a fourth quarter guy and stuff like that. Yes, that is true. But damn it, this is MVP level Joel Embiid. MVP level Joel Embiid. The Philadelphia 76ers does not sniff getting into the playoffs. So I'll take this version of Embiid because I know that there's still room for him to get better. He just needs to get healthier. He just needs to be more disciplined in how he takes care of his body. He very much like Nikola Jokic. Remember, there were years where we're talking about Nikola Jokic has got to get himself in shape. He flames out. He burns out. It took how many years for the Nuggets before they finally found that run that Jokic was ready to go? I think that this is the year Joel Embiid finally recognizes and realizes that now it's about health and taking care of your body as best as possible, managing yourself to be prepared to make those incredible runs when necessary. But as long as you got Tyrese Maxey, it doesn't have to be about, I need Joel Embiid scoring 20 points in the fourth quarter. It's really about the team collectively coming together where their best players are stepping in, stepping up, making things happen. And right now, my focus would be more so about the roster that Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey is surrounded by, rather than worrying about Joel Embiid, not being 100% or flaming out in the fourth quarter. This is not a James Harden situation right now when we're talking about Embiid.
Philadelphia would have been a top 6 seed had Embiid played even 5 more games, I think, honestly and truly. And I know injury seems to be the theme of this week's Autopsy report in terms of all these teams had significant things that they needed to overcome and then ultimately weren't able to do so. I think Philly, though, understands and knows that they were playing at a really, really good level. Nick Nurse had unlocked Embiid in a way that we hadn't seen before. And Tyrese Maxey, obviously the most improved player this year, was just lighting people up. But health was a maximum concern. It's really interesting, though, because you talked about the roster. Well, CL, do you know the 76ers only have 2 guys on the roster officially signed to next year? Joel Embiid and B-ball Paul Reed. Tyrese Maxey never got the extension done because I think Morey was trying to figure out, well, what might be available? Do I need to sign and trade him if something were to become what I'll remember all the Harden stuff to begin the year. Maxey played like a G the entire year, and he's going to be like, yo, give me my max money immediately. Joel Embiid has campaigned for this guy and says, like, hey, I want to stay in Philly, and this is my running mate. I haven't had somebody of this ilk, not just from a talent standpoint, but from a mental standpoint, an emotional standpoint, the locker room standpoint that Tyrese Maxey is giving. An amazing, amazing young man, great individual that everybody lights up when he's around. But Daryl Morey has been positioning this well. And I know there's various books on Morey.
He's playing with fire. I'm telling you right now.
Well, I mean, I think they know the Maxey deal or feel like the Maxey deal is like that's a foregone conclusion. But to only have 2 guys and they'll bring Maxey back at a max deal, there have so much cap space and so much opportunity, although it's a pretty crappy draft class. But if some guys, aka Paul George, opts out of his situation on the Clippers, then now you're kind of cooking with gas. There's a lot of ifs, a lot of buts, but I think Morey is positioned himself, and then you can bring back some guys, even a Buddy Hield, on a lesser deal. You can bring back Batum, Covington, who didn't see the light of day or whatever the case may be. Like, you can bring some of those guys back. I think you probably want Kelly Oubre back as well, but none of those guys, none of them have a contract going into next year.
Okay, so a couple of things. Love everything that you're saying, but if the intent is, the focus is Tyrese Maxey, fine, no problem. But this again speaks more to, this is what happens when you don't maximize, when you got guys on the cheap and you realize that you really need to put a solid roster around. Okay, is there a solid big that can back up Joel Embiid? I've not seen it, right? You're
worried. Bamba was a dud, no doubt.
Yeah, you're worried about his health, right? I bet you they probably wish they still had George Niang, right? Who's playing out in Cleveland right about now. But even at less, you have a big body out there. A guy can stretch the floor, shoot the three, right? That can back up Joel Embiid. So you're not expending him a lot, right? Nick Nurse had no choice but to basically throw a Joel Embiid out there, as much as he would love to go against Joel Embiid's wishes, because Joel Embiid wants to be out there. Sometimes Joel Embiid, you know what I'm saying, is talking out his behind about being out there, knowing that he's more a liability than he is providing you availability, right? So again, to me, what's going to be critical is, what kind of roster are you putting around the guys that you know are solid, right? And I'm going right back to my man, Tobias Harris. Love the guy, does not fit with the Philadelphia 76ers, okay? Forget he did not show up in that closeout game. Forget that he scored no points. It has nothing to do with that. This has been what's happened with Tobias Harris ever since he has been the third dude. Whether he likes it or doesn't like it, that's what it is. Tyrese Maxey probably could have been the third guy if Tobias Harris was doing what he was supposed to be doing. He came in as a prolific scorer in the front court position. That's never been the case since he's been playing next to, what is it, Simmons and Embiid.
But did you just say that you thought Tobias Harris should be the number 2 and Maxey be the number 3?
No. What I'm saying is, at the time when Tyrese Maxey first came to the Sixers, remember, he was coming off the bench, right? Sure. So there was opportunity for Tobias Harris to solidify himself to be the number 2 guy, because it wasn't supposed to be Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons is supposed to be the point guard, the point forward, right? And then Tobias Harris still didn't take advantage of that opportunity, right? Then you moved Simmons. Then you've got James Harden, right? James Harden clearly was not the guy that he was when he was playing out of Houston or Brooklyn or wherever else he was coming from. Tobias Harris still didn't take advantage of that. So it's just evident to me that Tobias Harris just does not play well next to Joel Embiid. And that's okay. But you can't keep running him out there, right? Knowing that you have a guy like Tyrese Maxey, who, with Embiid playing on one leg, you need a third scorer. So I would have probably been running out Buddy Hield a hell of a lot more. At least I know he's going to shoot the basketball. At least I know he's going to take shots aggressively when given the opportunity. Hell, you could put Kyle Lowry out there more. You know what I'm saying? But you can't have a guy out there that plays the position that he's playing and doesn't give you anything. And what I'm saying is it's not just one game, Shaw. This is through the course of the year. You've seen this going on. But Nick Nurse doesn't have a choice because you lack front court depth. And I think that is going to be something that has to be severely addressed by Daryl Morey come this this offseason. They need to beef up their front court. You need versatility, you need athleticism, and you need guys that want to score the basketball. Because once Tyrese Maxey gets in his bag, if Joel Embiid is still not 100%, your wing guys are going to have to go out there and supplement what you're not going to be getting from Joel Embiid from time to time, especially in these playoff games.
Well, let's just run through, I think, wing availability. So from our standpoint, DeMar DeRozan, you could probably try to do a situation like that. We've talked about Paul George. If he were to not work out with the Clippers, there's the creme de la creme. If LeBron wanted to really leave LA, and then you could try to flirt with that situation and bring him over there.
Pie in the sky.
I'm just saying. I mean, it's a possibility, air quotes. Those are, I think, when it comes to
that's a with or without question. Okay, that's a
3-4. Guys who play the 3 or 4 position who could fit alongside them, right? Because Tobias clearly is not the answer. But, I don't think they can get into the OG Anunoby situation. Pretty sure he's going to return to New York. Siakam's pretty assured he's going to return to Indiana, and then outside of that, it becomes pretty barren. But while Moore has set himself up to be a major player this year, there has to be players available to come to the roster. And I think that's where you can be like, all right, well, did you really set this up in the right way? And I think if worse came to worse, he would probably do what I think the Heat tried to do some years ago after their bubble run. Let's do a bunch of 2-year deals with team options on year 2. So you bring most of those guys back so that you don't tie up your money, and then you take another crack at it here in a couple of years. And I think that's probably what they ultimately do if none of those bigger names swing in their direction for whatever reason. But I don't think in any stretch of the imagination, even if it was a minimum deal, that Tobias Harris is back. And while he is a guy who averages a 17 a game and can shoot good percentages, there's just something not connecting when it comes to the big moments of what's needed for Philadelphia. And I do think he's going to be moving on, and he'll find a home, but it won't be in Philadelphia.
Listen, you can't have a playoff team like the Philadelphia 76ers and not be prepared that now that teams have seen how Tyrese Maxey operates and how Joel Embiid operates, that you're not going to now need a third person. You don't need a third superstar, right? You don't need but you need a third person who wants to score the basketball, who wants to help the team when the team goes through those rough patches. And one other thing, Shaw, that I think is really important and we should pay attention to. One thing that I've noticed about Joel Embiid, sometimes Joel Embiid wants things so badly that he makes a lot of mental mistakes. He turns the ball over a lot. Yeah. He's very careless with the basketball. I would like to see this offseason, Joel Embiid put a little bit more emphasis on learning how to trust his teammates and being able to move the basketball off the blocks, and do things in a way where it's just not predicated about him having to be face up. When he is, backing guys down, makes terrible mistakes with the ball, throwing the ball all over the place. But when he's facing guys up, oh yeah, it's like it's wonderful to see. It's like Kareem Olajuwon on the basketball court and things of that nature. And that's great. But when teams are going to have good defensive principles, like the Celtics, maybe even the Bucks from time to time, maybe even the Pacers from time to time, right?
Well, the team they just played,
right? You from time to time, you got guys like front court players that read you, to understand what you're trying to do, and ain't afraid to double you up because they know that you're going to be careless with the basketball. No bueno, man. No bueno. So It'll be very interesting. Again, part of that too is the other guys on the floor with you, knowing where they need to be, where they have to be, and being able to make it count when called upon.
Well, I'm going to quit Joel only in this aspect of, I think mentally he was fatigued in the latter part of this series. Like those turnovers weren't even just like basketball IQ mistakes. Like that, those were fatigue. That was like, I've lost confidence, in some of my physical ability. And it was just like, clearly the guy was right there. And it was so just uninspired. And that is not because he's an unintelligent player. I think he was just literally, his body had broken down on him in a way. And he just didn't have the gumption in essence to kind of get some of the stuff done, but still was out there. So I give him a lot of credit for being out there on that balky knee. But at the end of the day, I agree. Situationally, he could have read some things better there too. But it was interesting because there was times too where he was like, listen, I don't even want the ball. I don't even trust myself right now. And he was looking for Maxey. And I think that's the catch-22 of it. Like, all right, well, you're out there. So can you be the MVP guy or can you not? And I think he was just trying to have a presence out there and still played statistically very well for the majority part of that series, but just wasn't 100% healthy to give Philadelphia what they needed to get out of that first round.
Absolutely. Well, listen, after everyone gets exited, Dwight Howard was throwing out, in
the ultimate troll.
Instagram. He's like, they wouldn't have been knocked out of the first round if I was on that roster. So, and it wasn't Dwight Howard a part of the Sixers at some point?
Just no, but he's been campaigning for a job wherever he possibly can. Shout out to IT as well too. Another guy who got a chance but ultimately got swept in Phoenix. So don't know where he's like future for him moving forward either. But
he's like, he put me on just to watch this.
Tough.
This tough. Anyway, man, great show altogether, covering all of these teams. Listen, there's going to be an interesting offseason for the Heat, the Bucks, and for the for the Sixers. I wouldn't be surprised if some of some of the players, some of these teams is swapped between amongst themselves, right? And listen, maybe for the better, Listen, let me ask you, do you think you could see Tobias Harris playing in Miami?
No, not a heat culture guy at all. No, not a chance. I think Tobias Harris, could end up in Detroit. He could maybe even end up in a San Antonio. If Pop feels like they can try to extrapolate something out of them, even if it is like a 2-year deal until something more attractive becomes available. But I can see that. Interestingly enough, though, some early rumors are out there that Jimmy Butler may not have as long of a leash as he thinks he does in Miami, and Philadelphia would be interested in, bringing him back for the Tobias Harris mistake, and choosing him there. So I don't know how they would swing something like that, especially, how Butler has played recently. I mean, the injuries that he's had, but also being an older guy who wants an extension, to be paid $55 million a year. But I don't know if Morey's that desperate because he didn't do the Tobias Harris thing to begin with.
Yeah, well, but I just love that first interaction, maybe a media day with Butler and Joel Embiid. What up, though?
Yeah, I mean, they boys. So it would be an interesting situation. I can tell you one guy who, if he is still there, would not be that excited. That'd be one Kyle Lowry. He'd be like, I thought I got away from this mom. Here we go again. But it's all rumors right now.
Yeah. Just whispers. Anyway, Shaw, great show all together, man. And as always, just good for us to lay it down and we're not trying to throw dirt on the teams, but we do need to bury them.
Yes, indeed. So Miami, Philadelphia and company, we will see you next year. Thank you for playing. We have some nice jackets for you on your way out.
That's all.
And next up, we'll have the Clippers and the loser of Game 7 versus the Cavs and Orlando Magic. So great times here on the baseline. And
isn't it great to be dead? Dead and alive, right?
At the same time.
Same time. For the baseline, Callie, Warren, Shaw, we appreciate you guys. Thanks for hopping on board with us this week. And we'll catch up with you next time.